Are Christians allowed to swear? I find it fascinating how worked up the church gets about this, right? Like, you can be quietly hoarding wealth or nursing bitterness or ignoring the poor outside the door, but say shit in the church car park and suddenly you're a problem. Look, we've made certain sounds that come out of people's mouths into these moral litmus tests, while actual harm gets a pass as long as you smile nicely and say, gosh darn it. So let's talk about it, right? And not because I'm looking for permission to curse. I'm a grown man. I can sort that out for myself. But because the way we've handled this question says something deeper about how we understand God, holiness, and what actually matters. Right, so here's where we need to start. Words, they aren't magic spells, right? If I say, my gosh, instead of my God, what's actually changed there? A couple of letters, right? The intent is identical. The meaning is identical. I'm just swapping syllables to keep up appearances. And we all know it. And the same goes for feck versus the word it's standing in for. Everyone knows what you mean. You're just performing respectability. Because language works through shared meaning, right? We all know that. Not through some sort of sacred syllables that trigger something in the universe when you say them out loud. Now, this might seem obvious, but it wasn't to everyone. In the cultures around ancient Israel, Mesopotamia, Babylon, people genuinely believed words had power. They had spells and incarnation where the exact phrasing matters. Because the sound was doing the work. Say the right combination and you could control the gods, manipulate reality or bind spirits. But the Bible keeps pushing back against this idea. God isn't controlled, triggered, or manipulated by syllables. He's not sitting up there with a vocabulary list going, you said the bad one, you're out. He's more concerned with what's in your heart. Jesus makes this clear in Matthew 15. The Pharisees are losing it because his disciples weren't washing their hands the right way before eating. And Jesus says, it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, but what comes out of your heart. And then he lists actual harmful things, right? Evil thoughts, adultery, murder, idolatry, sexual immorality, theft, false testimony, slander. Notice he doesn't say cuss words, right? He's talking about speech that reveals a rotten heart, speech that tears people down, that lies, or that destroys. Christianity isn't about vocabulary management. It's about heart transfiguration. God isn't fragile about sounds. So if words aren't inherently sinful, where does that leave us? Paul talks about this exact kind of thing in 1 Corinthians 8, except he's talking about meat. Specifically, meat that's been sacrificed to the gods or sacrificed to idols. In Corinth, you'd go to the market and half the meat for sale had been part of some pagan ceremony list, right? And the Christians were asking, can we eat it? And Paul says, yeah, you can. The idol isn't real. The meat is just meat. You're not actually participating in idol worship by eating a steak that happened to be near a statue. But, and here's the key bit, if eating that meat is going to mess with somebody else's faith, if it's going to cause them to stumble or feel pressured into something that they're not ready for, then don't. Paul says, if what I eat causes my brother or sister to fall into sin, I will never eat meat again. It's not about the meat, it's about love. And you could apply that directly to swearing. The words themselves, they're not inherently sinful, but the context matters. Love outranks liberty. If the way I'm speaking is going to genuinely hurt someone, confuse someone who's new to the faith or push them away from hearing something true, well then I'll adjust. Not because God's offended by the word fuck, but because I care more about the person in front of me than I do about the right to say whatever I want. Paul goes on in chapter 9. He says, I have become all things to all people so that by all possible means I might save some. And he's talking about that. He's talking about adapting his posture, his approach, his speech to connect with whoever he's with. Not compromise, it's just wisdom. He's a Jew with Jews and he's a Gentile with Gentiles. He's flexible because the mission matters more than his personal preferences. Sometimes swearing connects. Sometimes it alienates. I love a good swear word that accentuates a point, to season it with salt, as Paul would say. But I moderate my language depending on where I am. I don't swear in a church small group. I don't swear when I'm working with teens. I usually don't swear in these videos, though clearly today is a bit of an exception, right? And not because those spaces are somehow holier, right? But because I'm trying to be more effective. I'm trying to speak in a way people can actually hear what I'm saying. Different spaces have different responsibilities. It's not about rules, it's about wisdom. Now here's where it can get a bit more important, right? Because there's actually a commandment about this, all right? You shall not take the name of your Lord your God in vain. And we've turned that kind of upside down, right? We've turned it into saying, don't say, oh my God, when you're surprised. But that's not what it means. In Hebrew thought, a name represents character and authority. Your name isn't just a label that you go by. You know, it's about who you are. So taking God's name in vain isn't about accidentally saying a phrase or a collection of syllables. It's about bearing God's name while misrepresenting him. It's about claiming to speak for God while actually doing the opposite of what God is like. Blasphemy is using God to justify cruelty. It's spiritualizing your ego. It's silencing victims in God's name. It's standing up in front of people and saying, God says, when what you're actually doing is protecting your power, your reputation, your comfort. That's taking the Lord's name in vain. That's blasphemy. Saying Jesus Christ when you stub your toe, it might make people uncomfortable, but it's not blasphemy. It's just habit. Maybe a careless one, maybe not a good one, but it's not bearing false witness about who God is. Using God's name to harm people, to manipulate, to control, that's the difference. That's the real offense. And the church has spent centuries policing the wrong thing. So what's the actual question we should be asking here? Not, is this word on some approved list, but what is my speech actually doing? Is it building people up, or is it tearing them down? Is it edifying, or is it dehumanizing? Paul says in Ephesians 4:29, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. The standard isn't vocabulary, it's effect, it's intent. Are you using your words to wound or to belittle or to put someone in their place, or are you using it to encourage them, to tell them the truth in love and to actually help them? We're meant to avoid legalism. We're not Pharisees, measuring holiness by how well we've kept up appearances. We're meant to be cultivating kindness, truth, love, the kind of speech that reflects the heart of God. So why does the church get so fixated on swearing if it's not the actual point? Well, this one's easy. It's an easy rule to enforce. You can hear it, you can measure it, you can correct it on the spot, and it makes holiness visible. You could feel righteous without actually having to transform anything. It's a lot harder to confront greed or pride or hypocrisy, the quiet ways we abuse power or ignore suffering. Those take discernment, honesty, and courage. But swearing, that's fairly straightforward. That's clean. And it lets you perform spirituality without dealing with your actual heart. So here's where I land on this. If swearing is going to lead you or the people around you towards sin, or if it's going to unnecessarily offend someone in a way that blocks them from hearing something, well then, avoid it. That's simple. Love matters more than liberty. But otherwise, fuck and shit and cunt and whatever else your heart needs to say. Because Christianity is not about sounding holy. It's about sounding like love. It's about a speech that reflects a transformed heart, not a managed vocabulary list. God cares about what's true, what's kind, and what builds his kingdom. He's not scared of your words. He's interested in your heart. So if this helped you reframe something, hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. It genuinely helps more people find this stuff. And if you want to support this work, you can find me over on Patreon. The link's in the description below. My name's Jacob, and this might be church.